I don't lack the intelligence or the sophistication to enjoy those types of movies. So I don't need to see myself in the characters in order to resonate with that. It's entertainment.
Right.
Like,
hello and welcome to another episode of Fuck Your Podcast. I'm Emma Pardo.
and I'm Katy Martin. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about when over-representation goes wrong in the world of TV, movies, things like that. So it's been a hot topic, especially people who you're very anti-woke people. Like, the world's becoming too woke. And we talk about how we already hate that buzzword because it's not really meant for what it's meant for, but to kind of shine a light on it, women, people of color, the LGBTQ community. It's like, when do they get offended where they feel like people are standing up for them just for show? Like, because that has to exist. And I think that's where we're getting to the point of some art forms. So, like, I know we were chatting about it, and a lot of people have complained about that with Disney already, but it's just becoming more blatant with, like, Disney Star Wars, and Disney's not the only one, but it's like, it's where you're making it your own personal mission that there's going to be representation of everybody, come hell or high water, compromising quality, compromising, how your fans feel about it. So, like, it's like, at what point does it honestly, where the social justice warriors, so to speak, who aren't part of the community that they're representing or that they're trying to represent, where it actually becomes offensive to the marginalized group?
Right. The one thing that I can think of, because I mean, we can get into the Star Wars show that you were telling me about, but do you remember when people freaked out over Finding Dory when they had the two moms? But I feel like when watching it, maybe I just am like, whatever about, like, I don't care even if that was, but I don't think that was ever made point like, oh, this is a lesbian couple, like, represented in the movie. And if it is, great. But they did that in a way that was, like, not forced. It was just like, it was there and nobody had to comment on it in the movie. So it doesn't affect anything with the plot. It doesn't affect anything with how you perceive the movie. And I don't know, like, I'm trying to understand why people blew up about it when there's other situations that it's just like, this is obviously forced. Like, for example, in the show that you were watching. So there's, like, two different ends of it. And I think, I don't know.
And I mean, there's so many different angles. Like, let's just take female characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have these weird groups, like, let's take, like, science fiction genre in general. So not even specific, like, everybody knows that I'm a Star Wars nerd, and, don't come after me like, no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. I mean, because it's not, we just want quality. We want quality movies, honestly. I mean, there are a couple of the TV shows that are good, but what Disney has basically turned this into with all the IP that they own, and it's not exclusive to Star Wars, is that they're just making content, and some of it feels like it's just content to have content, because some of it's not very good.
Right.
I can tell you, I've watched all of it. Like, I've given all of it a shot. And there's now to the point where it's definitely different levels. But if we go back to the history, for some reason, the studios just assumed that girls and women just didn't like science fiction stuff. That they just didn't. Which this extends back to, the late 60s and the early 70s, or throughout the 70s and the early 80s, when you had some of the biggest sci-fi franchises. And so they felt like they had to make a point. And this is what the messed up part is that there's always been reasonable representation of heroes versus villains being male, female, whatever the case.
Right.
To where it's like, I don't feel like I needed that forced representation. Like, I've, think of Alien and the Alien franchise. The main hero throughout those movies, although some of them aren't great, but there's some of them that are fantastic, was a woman. Main character was a woman. And it was more, in the beginning, it was more organic. So when they try to, like, shove certain things, as a woman, I kind of get, like, offended. Like, I don't need that. Like, I don't lack the intelligence or the sophistication to enjoy those types of movies. So I don't need to see myself in the characters in order to resonate with that. It's entertainment.
Right.
it's, you don't have to have, not everybody, I think they assume that everybody has to have that connection. Now, on the flip side, like, let's say, for example, Captain Marvel and all the controversy around that. The Little Mermaid being cast as black. There was controversy around that. Now, I would say if a little girl does look at that and go, hey, that makes me feel kind of good because I kind of see myself in that character, then great. But I think there's instances where they're making a point. It's so calculated and it feels so fabricated in a lab sometimes, to where it's like, I don't know, like, this is teetering on the point of almost being offensive in the wrong way. Like, it doesn't necessarily offend me, but sometimes it offends my intelligence.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like it, and it's and that's when you talk about catering entertainment, specifically like gender based. I mean, just look at soap operas and daytime TV, because they assume that the woman, and advertising towards women is like, they assume that if you're a stay-at-home mom, that you're an uneducated moron, and they're going to dumb this stuff down to a level that, if we put flowers and pretty things in there, then they're gonna buy it. Like, it's turning movies way more into focusing on, like you do with products, stereotypical consumerism, that, like, I think some of it's offensive, towards I would think, and again, I can't speak for other people, but I know that I've looked at it and go, well, that's fucking offensive. Just me being a woman, that's more offensive that you're assuming, and as opposed to really just making quality cinema. Like, you're trying to bank the success of something based off of pandering to a demographic versus just making a quality product. Like, just make a quality movie. Just put a movie back in theaters. Like, quit making all the TV shows that you're just trying to pander. Like, it's all the shit that we complain about in politics is now just, to me, it's just widespread in consumerism and entertainment and art, where I feel like it's like, hey, at what point does this become insulting to everybody else in a minority group? And I don't know, I could be overthinking it.
No, I don't think it's like an overthinking thing. I'm all for being inclusive. I'm all for it. What is bothersome is the overstretch of it. And not only in like movies and TV shows are we seeing that. I'm seeing it with a lot of content on TikTok. There's a couple creators that I've seen that are pushing the boundaries on just making people feel bad for their feelings, if that makes sense. So something that I saw that was just it kind of goes along with just being so far forced and it was another creator that was commenting on it, but it was this I think non-binary person that was saying that they were misgendered at work, and it's made them spiral that they had gone home from their shift and called in the next day because they were spiraling on the topic. I don't know if you've seen it. It's kind
I think I know what you're talking about.
It went viral a long time ago.
Right. It wasn't that long ago, within the last couple months.
Yeah, and then it's like resurfacing, and people are making comments on it like, I don't know. I'm all for mental health. I'm all for expressing yourself. I'm all for being inclusive. I think I just would find that so frustrating if I was the coworker of that person, or like even just an avid like supporter of that TV show or movie. Mm-hmm. Going, that's not the intent behind what happened. And I can't speak for the person that was misgendered, but for TV shows, it's like when somebody's not bringing up the inclusivity of it, it's just a storyline. But when somebody brings that up, then somebody feels that they have to provide the diversity, which I understand. It just turns it into something else that becomes political, that didn't need to be political.
Right. It didn't need to be. It's entertainment. Well, and I think part of what you're saying too is there's nothing wrong with being inclusive. That's just being a decent person.
Right.
Like, if you just focus on being a decent person and you're not, but it's when you're kind of forcing this next level of inclusion.
It's villainizing something that wasn't a villain.
Right. Well, basically forcing inclusion into something that was never exclusive.
Right.
So, and I think that's where I get the problem with, like, don't assume this isn't for me. Like, if I choose that it's for me, I choose that it's for me. I'm not getting a vibe. Like, the more that you're trying to force this as being inclusive of other groups of people, it's not that it's forcing me to be exclusive. It's you're insulting my intelligence.
Right.
You're insulting my my, you're insulting my belief system of like, this has to be shoved in my face because I'm not inclusive, and that's not the case. But with the show, so, and I think, and here's the thing, when it's natural, the difference is it naturally part of the story? Great. But if you are pushing 3 or 4 different main points just for the sake of doing it, and it's because in reality you're doing it because you know that the product is just bad. And I think that's what they did, and that's what and that's what Disney's starting to do with some of these products, is because they're kind of pandering in an insulting way to some of these marginalized groups, not for the sake of saying that they're to the public. What they're saying is, look at us being open-minded and inclusive. No, they're like insulting their intelligence, saying you'll like us if we pander to you because you're just not intelligent enough to get the bigger picture or the bigger story. And that's the shit that's insulting.
Right.
So, and I guarantee you that's what they did. So what we're talking about is the Star Wars The Acolyte. And again,
which I have not seen. I have not seen that.
It just came out last night. They did a 2-episode premiere. They had reviewers talking about it, like just your standard YouTube movie and pop culture reviewers, like people who they give the previews to. They can give their opinions on it without giving away spoilers. There's an embargo on it for so many days. Then the embargo was lifted yesterday because it's the day that the show is coming out.
Right.
So then the reviewers started giving, because they were able to watch the first 4 episodes. So the first two episodes aired last night, which this is a weird thing that Disney's been doing with some of their content, not only with Star Wars, but with the Marvel side of things. They'll let reviewers preview more episodes, and then they'll do a 2-episode release to try to get you hooked. So Justin read some of the reviews yesterday morning. He goes, well, we're going to still try to watch this show. However, do you want to know the storyline of the first 4 episodes? And I'm like, no. I don't. I'll watch the first 2. If I'm not feeling it by the first 2, then we can bail. And he's like, everything that I've read says that you're gonna rage quit by the 4th episode. And I'm like,
really?
I'm like, why? He goes, it's just because the storyline is stupid. Like and again, they did this shit with is it The Last Jedi? So here's the thing that you don't do. You got to remember, Star Wars fans now expand 3 generations.
Right.
You have people who are grandparents that were huge Star Wars fans in the 70s that now have grandchildren that love Star Wars movies.
Right.
So you have this wide age gap, or wide age span of fans, and I want to say that it was the last. Is either The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker, one of the last movies where they had 2 females that were a couple that kissed at the end, like a celebratory kiss, and people got bent out of shape. And I don't think people got bent out of shape that there was lesbians in a movie, because most people don't care. Like, it's a normal part of life now. But it was the way that every single person in the theater just kind of went, huh, that was just weird how that was just shoved in there. And
right.
And then the way that any kind of criticism that Lucasfilm was getting at the time, they were making a point to come out and say, well, that's just because you just don't understand it. You just don't get it. And I'm like, no, we get it. And we honestly there's not a problem that's had with it, other than when it's noticeable and out of place, you're like, you just did that solely as a stunt. Like, it takes away from the fact that those 2 movies were shitty anyway.
Right.
But I think they know that. I think that's when they know that they've made something that is going to suck.
Right.
And they're like, okay, well, it's going to suck, but let's make sure we have a couple big points where somebody can cheer us on because we did something innovative, or we did something, and it just takes away from the quality. Right. And not
I was going to ask you, though, going along with this, like in the Star Wars franchise as a whole, when do you think enough is enough? When do you think they should be or should have been done milking it?
Well, it's getting bad now.
That's what I'm saying, is like,
the sequel movies were terrible. They should have listened to the real feedback. The Force Awakens is still like the highest grossing movie ever. But after The Last Jedi, and The Last Jedi didn't have anything that was other than, we're just trying to subvert your expectations. It's more that instead of looking at creating a good story and creating a good movie or creating a good TV show, their focus is, I want to give a very inexperienced filmmaker an opportunity because they are this or they are that. So, and based on like the writer and the director of this show, it was primarily because she was a woman and she was a lesbian. So it's like, it's almost like they're checking the equal opportunity things off the list.
Yeah.
And the Mandalorian, I think, did that organically. They had a black man, they had a black woman, like as far as writers and directors. So the creative team for that show was a beautiful mix of people. And at no point did you ever watch that show and go, they're pushing some sort of an agenda based on their belief system. Never. And
Right.
and again, I don't even know necessarily if she's pushing an agenda. She injected some of that into it. It's just that she's just not that good of a writer and a director. She's just not that good.
Yeah.
And
They're
and
just
when you just point that out, you're like, oh, you're just a homophobe. And it's like, no, she's just not a good writer or director. It is what it is. And the same, like Rian Johnson, that guy made a couple very terrific, very popular movies. But whatever he decided to do with Star Wars for The Last Jedi was like, what the fuck were you thinking? So you can just have a flop.
Right. Or
Can
sometimes
embrace
I
the
think
flop.
sometimes it's better to just not than to like to try and make it go a certain direction. I think again, it's like there's some things that don't have to be.
Right. And a lot of that stems from Kathleen Kennedy, who's the CEO of Lucasfilm right now. And the stuff that she's shoving in some of these movies is based on her own personal agenda. It's literally just her. And the fucked up thing is Star Wars or Disney paid 400 and something billion dollars for the Star Wars IP. And I don't know what they paid for Marvel. But the purpose of that was Disney accommodated to children. Now, it did. They accommodated to children, and they had a pretty good mix. They had when it came to commercialism, they had the Disney princesses, and that was tailored to girls.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wanted something that they could commercialize product focused towards little boys. And that was the purpose of buying Star Wars and buying Marvel, because now they can make superhero toys and superhero clothes and
Right.
Star Wars. Like it was to accommodate, to have a better Disney, a better solidified Disney property that was focused to boys.
Right.
Because even though you had the Disney cartoons, you had all the Disney cartoons, you had the Pixar cartoons, which again, I think was a good mix.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can enjoy those movies. They were quality. You had the Cars franchise. So that was,
Which they should have stopped the Cars franchise after the first one. Don't even get me started. I was just talking to Cole about that the other day. And
I don't know if I ever watched any of the sequels.
No, I've never. I think we started watching Cars 2 when it came out years ago, and it was just not good. I think that they ruined they milked that too hard.
Yeah.
I think they also milked Shrek a little too hard because they should have stopped after the second one. I think they're starting to milk Toy Story. Like,
oh, they did. Well, that's just more of like they're milking that particular
I
like,
get it from a marketing standpoint. It's like, and especially like as a parent now, it's like, oh, I enjoyed that as a kid. I'm glad they have something that's coming out newer that I could show to, crew, and he can get excited about it. But it's like, as someone who was there in the beginning, actually, I want to see when Toy Story came out because that was
probably 2 years before you were born.
The first 3 years before I was born.
Yeah. So I knew Toy Story came out when I was a kid.
Yeah. So like, that's the thing, is like being in the early stages of that before it got strewed.
People bring that. I mean, that's a typical argument when it comes to sequels.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference between sequels and extending the IP or taking the original IP and then remaking it or rebooting it. I just watched a whole video. So Justin and I watch Red Letter Media. Like, we're probably some of their biggest fans. We watch Red Letter Media is a group of guys that were film students, and they've made a couple, like their own small short movies and things like that. But they're movie reviewers.
Mm-hmm.
They're very well educated. They all went to film school. And so it was just a video this past week where they talked about reboots and sequels, and the most successful movies of all time, were never a reboot or a sequel. It's like, that should tell you something. Like, they're all original is, but there's a whole video. So if anybody listening is like a super movie nerd, the video they just released was about the death of movie theaters and how Hollywood has they just try to keep throwing money at the problem and not focusing on exactly what I said. Just focus on writing a good story. Just focus on writing a good story. Be creative. Like, this was an art form. So when people can go and it's just mindless entertainment and they kind of know what they're going to get, especially with a big studio movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they also know now that from the time a movie has a theatrical release until it's streaming in your home is the shortest window in history. It's the shortest. Like, when I was a kid, shit, even up until young adulthood, you would have a movie that would get a theatrical release. That theatrical release would last at least 6 weeks, sometimes more than that. And then not only that was their first run theatrical release, then after so many weeks, it went to the dollar movie theater and had an entire second run of a theatrical release. Then you had like 6 months before you could even rent it on video, and then good luck getting it at the video store.
Right.
Into a Blockbuster and they would be rented out. And then usually you had a rental time frame before you could even buy it, where you could actually buy it and own it on VHS or especially in the world of back in VHS before DVDs became the mainstream rental product, which was like the early 2000s. So right now people they don't have any incentive to go to the theaters. One, because of the quality of these larger productions, something that it costs $400 million to make a movie. Now there's no chance of them getting that back.
Right.
Based on box office sales. And so if you're something like a Disney or a Warner Brothers, Disney's part of Marvel, so now you're talking Star Wars, we almost know what to expect because it's crafted in a lab. Like, there's no creativity behind it. There's no brain power behind it. I honestly think both of those episodes of that show I watched last night were written by AI. Like, it was just so bad. So why would you?
And so with you saying that, do you think that's going to be a trend going forward with a lot of different things?
It already is.
I know it's huge. And I know we talked about it with our episode with David, not the last one, the one that we had him on for his second guest appearance. We talked about like AI being able to bring actors back from the dead, essentially. Yeah, I think it's tone deaf. I think it is
a little tone deaf. I would agree.
You're just not going to get that, and it's okay.
So here's the thing.
Find it in something else.
If you wanted to build a flashback, if you wanted to build a flashback, if you wanted to show, I would say it's more appropriate if you wanted to show like a flashback from something in the past, and then you're bringing back that actor respectfully with the blessing of the family, because
it's cleared extensive approval.
But can you continue to create new stuff with AI and it's not considered to be like, unethical? No, you can't. Like, you can't do that. Like, and Star Wars is guilty of that. I mean, you can't really help when you have an actor die mid-movie.
Right.
There's been instances of that. I mean, there's ways to handle that. But I mean, there's certain instances with like AI and de-aging that's appropriate, where it's not exploitative. So if you get to the point where you're exploiting the actor and their memory, and it starts to get super diluted, then no, that's not okay. But like the instance, I could think of the first one that was super noticeable was Tron Legacy, when that was like the Tron reboot from, I guess, the early 2000s. I can't remember what year that movie came out. But they de-aged Jeff Bridges. And he was still alive, and he was still in the movie, but they were featuring like flashbacks.
In July, like Tron was July 1982.
No, not Tron. Tron Legacy, the reboot.
Let me look. 2010.
Okay, so Jeff Bridges was in the movie, still alive. He's still alive now. They de-aged him for the purpose of a flashback, and it made sense in the story.
That makes sense. That makes sense where it goes along with it, but doing it out of trying to grab something that's no longer there is tone deaf.
And you can't, and so you could kind of make that argument with The Mandalorian when Luke Skywalker shows up, because timeline wise, he's supposed to be quite a bit younger, and obviously Mark Hamill can't play a 30-year-old version of himself anymore, but he was part of it. He was participating in it. He was compensated for it, but you can't like go on and make the movies that you can't go and make the movies that the Star Wars fans really wanted, that should have come out in the early 90s, that George Lucas didn't make, versus the crap they're putting out now. Like, Like, not only is it was tone deaf. This storyline, period, based on the time frame and like, if we want to get into super nerdy shit, I'll try to avoid that. So just stop me if I sound like I'm going down that road. But it's like saying, hey, you're really interested in this fantasy world, and fantasy, and it could be anything. It could be Star Wars, it could be Game of Thrones, it could be Lord of the Rings. Like, I mean, there's so many different fantasy worlds that they've expanded on well. But no, but what I'm saying is, like, there's a way you if you listen to the fans, you kind of get a vibe for what they would want to see more of.
Right.
You know? So it's like the prequels with Star Wars, that's what George Lucas wanted to make. That is not what the fans wanted. And was it a split, like, love hate? You either love them or you hate them. So you can't go back. And so, like, right now with this show that they're playing right now, it's like a part of the universe and a timeline that already nobody gives a shit about.
Right.
Like, so it's now, were people kind of interested in the prequels about, like, how Darth Vader got from
Which that stuff's understandable.
Yeah.
But again, I think anything at this point, especially after what you experienced with the show, is milking it and there's nothing left to milk. Like,
well, they're not even milking the right cow. Like, if you think about it, that's like if you had 10 cows on a farm and you have 3 of them that are the top quality, keep milking from the 3 top quality ones. And that's not what they're doing. What they're doing now is, like, we paid, this is what it comes down to. We paid $40 billion or $400 billion or whatever it was, 400 million. It was a ridiculous amount of money. We paid however much money for this IP. We need to crank out content.
Right.
When they realize that they're not very good at making up ideas, then they shoehorn in things to pander to groups of people. And it's because they already know that the fans don't give a shit about what you're writing about, and they already know that it's not quality.
Right.
They already know that it's going to suck. They're releasing it knowing it's going to suck.
Right.
But it's going to keep people interested because there are 2 moms, or there's something along those lines, right? Like, it's they're and if I were a lesbian, I'd be insulted. Like, if I were a gay Star Wars fan, I would be insulted. Because it's like, no, I don't need you to just shoehorn in a gay couple for me to like it. I want you to make good quality stuff. And you just aren't. And so but then they have a defense where when somebody criticizes it, it's like, oh, you just don't understand it because you're just not as open-minded as everybody else.
And that there just comes a point where that's crossing a threshold.
Right. And it can be anything. I mean, it doesn't even have to, like, I know I'm hitting on the LGBTQ stuff because it was what was relevant to this show. Right. But it could be anything. Again, pandering to girls versus boys. Like, but to where it's so obvious, where it's like, no, we don't have a problem with that stuff. We have a problem with that you're shoving it in there to get people to watch it because you already know that the show sucks.
Right.
So just make better movies. Like, honestly, Star Wars isn't meant to be TV shows. Now, have they had some good ones? Yep. Have they had some sucky ones? Yep. But no, they're meant to be movies, and I think they just don't do that right now because they know this also the state of the world when it comes to movies in general. Because people just aren't going to theaters. But it's a situation that they all created. And there's proof right now you can make super quality movies without having such an inflated budget. But I don't know. I digress. I think that's just where, again, I can't tell people how to think and I can't tell people how to feel, but there's a point, regardless of the group that you're in. If you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you're part of the LGBTQ community, where you feel like that representation is forced for the purpose of getting people to watch.
Right.
To me, that seems insulting. And it's getting fucking old. It just is. Like, it's like I don't have a problem with that being part of the storyline if it makes sense, but you're shoving it in there to get people to watch because you already know that it sucks.
Right.
So, and to me, that's insulting.
Justice, I don't know if you could edit this out. My power has been flickering. So I was praying that our power did not go out while you were in the middle of that, but just to be safe, I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
We're also at that time, but just to be safe. So
anyway, 0 out of 10. Don't recommend.
Don't recommend what?
The Acolyte on Disney Plus.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll never watch it, so that's fine.
Yeah, just don't. There's no reason to. I mean, if you're a casual Star Wars fan, you're just not going to give a shit. If you're even if you're a hardcore Star Wars fan, I just don't think you're going to give a shit because it's a time in the Star Wars universe history that nobody fucking cares about.
Right.
So,
Anyway, if you want to hear a topic, if you want some advice, if you just want to chat, you can reach out to us on Instagram at F__K your pod, or you can email me at Emma at 99 Creatives.
or Katy at 99 Creatives.
Don't forget to subscribe. We put out new videos or episodes every Friday. And if you're looking for more business related content, you can also connect with us on our TikTok or Instagram, which is at 99 Creatives. Yeah. Anyway, okay, bye.
Adios.